Okay. All right. So we'll get started with our prayer. And I don't know if you've noticed, but it's always the same, but I think it's a good one. If you'll follow with me and read along with me or not, let's see. Opening prayer, creating and loving God, as we read your word together, may allow it to read to us. As we enter into your story, may we understand our own stories with more clarity and wisdom. Help us to remember that you have always worked through the lives of ordinary women and men with all their faults and failings. People like us, we bring our ordinary lives before you today. Transform our expectations so that as we study stories of the past, we may be open to your extraordinary future. I love that prayer. Thank you. And Todd, turn it over to you.
All right. Let's get started with this. There we go. Okay, I hope I can read all of this as we pull it up on the screen. We are continuing to look at the things that we've learned from our grandmothers. And this month is actually one of 2 months when we'll be looking at Ruth. So if you all will mute yourselves until we get to the point where somebody else will be speaking, then the recording will work a little better for those who are going to come back and hear it later. So we got 2 months, this month, and then our next month, which is January, right? We do, right? Okay, that's what I was thinking. So we have the first half of Ruth, which is the first 2 chapters. And then when we come back again the next time, we'll deal with chapters 3 and 4. And this lesson is about the loyal love that Ruth and Naomi have for one another, because that's mostly what happens in the first 2 chapters before we get to the rest of the story. After we learn what happens when they come back to Bethlehem. So I love the part that the lesson planners talk about how this is really like a play, a screenplay or play. And that it focuses on, of course, divine faithfulness, because that the Hebrew word hesed is probably the most prominently used term to describe who God is and what God does. And in a lot of ways, the whole book of Ruth is all about how that plays out in the lives of real people. Who in some ways seem to be inserted into the biblical story because they don't go along with all the other stuff that's in there, and yet they tell us things that in some ways we need to know as much or more than all of the stuff about the kings and the wars and all that stuff, because this is really about who God is and what God does, and this Ruth story is a wonderful way of telling that. So we're going to look at mostly Ruth and Naomi here. We'll get introduced to Boaz, but not get very far into that. And then when we come back for the next lesson, we'll pick up the Boaz and Ruth story. So as the writer of the lesson said, Act 1 of this screenplay is chapter 1 of Ruth. So we're just going to read through it and comment on it as we go. It's way too much to read all at once, and then we'll miss out on everything. So I'm just going to read a little bit, make a few comments, and just keep going. Tell you a few stories, and then we got a really good story about First Presbyterian Church Greeneville when we get to the end. So the story starts out saying, in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. So it's famine that causes them to leave, because Bethlehem, Judah, that's their homeland. They wouldn't leave that for any other reason except for something as extreme as famine, and that is no food. And without food, you just don't last very long. So they have to go somewhere else, and they go to a country called Moab. Story goes on and says, but Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These, that is the 2 sons, took Moabite wives. The name of the one wife was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. When they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Now, here's the part when I want to tell you a little bit about something that happened to me in April of last year, because I had forgotten all about this. When we're in seminary and we're nearing graduation, when we get to our last year, one of the things that the Masters of Divinity students are required to do is to preach a sermon before everybody who shows up on campus in the chapel on, I think we had one day every week where there was somebody who gave they called it the senior sermon. So you gave that senior sermon, and then it was evaluated not only by your homiletics professor who had taught you hopefully what you needed to know to preach, but there were also some students, some of your peers, who also commented and critiqued your sermon. So it was kind of a stressful thing to have that experience, especially when I had never really preached much of anywhere else before, never really even thought about preaching. So I had to give this senior sermon, and I remember absolutely nothing about it. That was probably good, because that means that I was able to forget it. But in April of 2020, I got a Facebook Messenger message, that is a private message, from one of my seminary classmates who was a rather casual acquaintance of mine. I really didn't know her all that well. And we had not communicated with each other for 30 years because we had graduated from seminary 30 years ago. But she sent me this message, and we were not Facebook friends at that time. Eventually we became Facebook friends, and we've communicated a little bit since then. But I'm going to just read you the brief message that she sent me, because I was just awestruck. She says, "Hello, Todd. I don't know if you remember me from seminary or not, but I remember you." She said, "Can you imagine how many sermons each of us has heard in our lifetimes by the time we went to seminary?" Well, I couldn't imagine, but I did the math, and I figured it was somewhere around 1,300 that I had heard before I went to seminary. And she said, "I remember a line from your senior sermon." I thought, wow, I'm glad you do, because I don't. She said, "You were preaching about Ruth and Naomi." Did not even remember what text I had used. She said, "You were talking about Naomi's son, whichever one of those, who had been attracted to Ruth and had married her." And she said that you put words in his mouth and said that he had always been drawn to having a lot more coffee than cream in his drink. That is sort of a reference to perhaps the dark skin that the Moabite Ruth probably had. And she said, "You opened up a whole new way of thinking about language in a sermon for me. I've always been grateful to you for giving permission to flavor our preaching with colloquialisms and the reality of our day-to-day lives." She said, "I knew this was okay, but somehow hearing you embody it gave it more power and validity for me." Well, I never knew that at all, that anybody would remember anything about my sermon. But Naomi and Ruth and this story apparently was what the what my senior sermon was about. So after we answer that phone call, we'll go on. All righty. All right. Story continues. Then she started to return with her daughters-in-law from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had considered his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she had been living, she and her two daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to go back to the land of Judah. So it seems like at this point, some 10 plus years later, the famine is over. Now, she didn't read about that on Facebook. She didn't read about that in the newspaper. Someone from the homeland who had been traveling through there or had been there and had come to Moab had to tell her that. And this was surely good news in some ways, but it was probably also quite threatening for her. But she decides that it's time to go back home. And all she has is these two daughters-in-law, because both her husband and her two sons are buried there in Moab. So the story goes on and says, but Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find security, each of you, in the house of your husband. Then she kissed them and they wept aloud. They said to her, no, we will return with you to your people. Very interesting that she talks about going back to your mother's house, because in that culture, mothers didn't have houses. And yet this is a woman talking to women. And she probably knows that, in fact, even though the law says a mother doesn't have a house, she knew good and well that mothers did have houses. But she also mentions finding security in the house of your husband, meaning she was expecting and hoping that they would be able to remarry. So this is a very painful separation that Naomi is thinking about making between these two daughters-in-law, because they are all the family that she has at this point. So he goes on and says, but Naomi said, turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they were grown? Would you then refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, it has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me. Remember that word bitter, because we're going to come back to it. But this is the harsh reality that Naomi is facing, and she realizes that Ruth and Orpah are both facing also, because there is this whole concept in Middle Eastern culture about levirate marriage, where if a husband dies without producing a son for his wife, that the younger brothers one of them must marry her and provide a son, and that son will be considered the child of the first husband, even though he would be the child of a younger brother. So that's the experience that Naomi is imagining for them, realizing there are no other siblings that can marry these two. And so that's why she's trying to get them to go back home. Verse 14 says, and they wept aloud again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, that is, and prepared to go back home. But Ruth clung to her. That's one of the words that really jumped out at me in this text every time I read it, for as long as I can remember, since I was a little kid. There's some powerful adhesive going on there with Ruth to be clinging to her mother-in-law, Naomi. In fact, the Hebrew word dabak means to cling or to cleave, as the King James Version translates this, or to be joined together. And then, so she said, Naomi says to Ruth, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law, that is, go back home. But Ruth said, do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you. Now, here's a little story I want to share with you about this phrase from the King James that Ruth makes. This is actually a picture of my daughter's hand that she sent to us when she got engaged over 10 years ago. So that's the ring that her fiance Curtis gave her. And for her and Curtis, for their wedding, I wrote a little something using the line from the King James that Ruth says, "Whither thou goest." So I want to share that with you because it just makes me think of the power that Ruth speaks and lives in these lines that she tells to Naomi. So this is about whither thou goest. Would that our speech was still so full of color. That is the color of the old English language, but then we might also be stuck with such a worldview as they had back then, and barbaric treatment for classes and peoples that are deemed lower. But really not that the flora of the language has a direct impact on behavior, or for that matter, that we're completely, if at all, immune from such provincial thought and behavior now. Whither thou goest. It is a promise of the highest order, spoken in the midst of a strange redeeming, where land and mouths to feed seem to be of greater import than emotions and relationships. Ruth, the outsider of outsiders, Moabite that she is, throws her ethnicity to the wind and pledges her troth to a mother-in-law who is as good as dead, because that's what Naomi said. It is really the pledge of all who abandon self for the sake of God. Home and kin, vocation and comfort, all tossed into the whirlwind of God's tempestuous travel plans. Who knows how many times it has been used to caulk wedding vows, betrothed cleaving themselves one to another. This text is one of the often used texts in wedding ceremonies. I do not claim to understand the mystery of enduring matrimony, but it does seem to me that when both partners are willing to live, not just speak whither thou goest, first to God and then to each other, the grace not only of longevity, but also of joy is within their reach. And Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God, my God." Story goes on. When Naomi saw that she, Ruth, was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women in the town said, "Is this Naomi?" Remember, she's been gone for over 10 years. This is, in fact, for Naomi, what will become a bittersweet homecoming, especially in the beginning. She's not recognized. They don't know if that's her. And she realizes that she is basically not only coming back with nothing, but she's actually coming back with a burden, a daughter-in-law who, number one, is not married, does not have a husband, but also is, as we are wont to say in the South, not from around here. So she is doubly burdened with this daughter-in-law. Bethlehem, they mention over and over. It was mentioned in the beginning of the text. It's mentioned here in this text. One of the amazing things I always think about Bethlehem, where Jesus was born and where this story comes from, literally means house of bread. Bet is the word for house. So Bethlehem means house of bread. Interesting place to return to when the famine's over, huh? Story goes on. She said to them, call me no longer Naomi, which means pleasant, but call me Mara. Remember, she said bitter. Well, she's decided her name needs to be changed to bitter. For the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, that is, full of a husband and sons and a family, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Not only the emptiness of the empty stomach of the famine, but also the emptiness of no longer having her three immediate family members with her. She says, why call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? Lament. We studied that for a year, didn't we? Well, this is Naomi's lament. When she returns back home, she lays it all out there and puts it in God's hand. This is her lament. So Naomi returned together with Ruth, the Moabite. Notice how they always have to throw that in there when they describe Ruth, just in case you've forgotten where she came from. Her daughter-in-law, who came back with her from the country of where? Moab. They came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Oh, good timing to come back. I call this barley timing. Barley would be good food to eat. The interesting part about barley, you don't ever go to the store around here or probably anywhere else in the United States and find bread that has much, if any, barley in it whatsoever. And in this time, when this story was written on up through the first century, barley was actually considered to be poor people's grain, not as good as wheat in terms of providing nutrition and flavor and everything else. So it's interesting that they return at the time of the harvesting of barley, which would be the grain that was the cheapest and the least nutritious for everybody. But for people who've been through a famine, barley is probably fit for a king. So they come back at the time of the barley harvest. So that is basically Act 1. So we move on in at this point to Act 2, which is chapter 2. Now, Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a prominent rich man of the family of Elimelech, her husband, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain behind someone in whose sight I may find favor. Naomi said to her, go, my daughter. So she went. She came and gleaned in a field behind the reapers. As it happened, she came to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Now, this gleaning idea is not something that we know very much about, but in the description to people who had wealth and had property and had crops to pick, one of the things that they were always instructed to do was not to pick every last grain. They were to leave the edges of the field, to let the stuff that fell off the wagon before they got it harvested, leave it laying in the field, because there are people who don't have food and they will come along behind the harvesters and pick up the scraps that are left over. So that is what Ruth has decided that she's going to do to provide for herself as well as for her mother-in-law. She's going to pick up the scraps, and that is very difficult labor. But the interesting part that we'll talk more about at the next lesson is that the name Boaz literally means strength. He is the strong one. And the narrator has already told us that he is also wealthy. And now we know he has this field. And lo and behold, this is the place that Ruth ends up gleaning in without asking her mother-in-law who Boaz was or where she could go. She just ended up being there. We might say providentially so. Just then, the narrator says, Boaz came from Bethlehem. He said to the reapers, the Lord be with you. I thought they were going to have communion here for a minute when it started out with the Lord be with you. They answered, the Lord bless you. Then Boaz said to his servant who was in charge of the reapers, that is, who oversaw what was going on with the reapers, he said, to whom does this young woman belong? You know, because young women always belong to somebody. And the servant who was in charge of the reapers said, she is the Moabite who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said that as she said to me, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers. So she came, and she has been on her feet from early this morning until now, without resting even for a moment. The Moabite. Seems like she's going to forever be known as the Moabite, like that's going to be her middle name, because everybody wants to know, you know, who's your mama and them? Where are you from? Well, she's the Moabite. Then Boaz turns to Ruth and says, now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. So there are other women working in the field. Keep your eyes on the field that is being reaped and follow behind them. I have ordered the young men not to bother you. If you get thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn. Wow, this is a big turn. There were a lot of folks who despised the gleaners and who probably did not treat them well and tried in some ways to run them off. But Boaz has turned around and has spoken specifically to Ruth, knowing where she came from and who she was, knowing that he is in some way distantly kin to her, and grants her favor and says, don't go anywhere else. This is the place where you'll be taken care of. Then Ruth fell prostrate with her face to the ground and said to him, why have I found favor in your sight that you should take notice of me when I am a foreigner? Yeah, we all knew that because everybody's talking about it. But Boaz answered her, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told me, and how you left your father and mother in your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. So Ruth's story has gotten out and Boaz has heard it. I couldn't help but think of a song when I heard this, when the description of what Ruth is doing. You know, the end of this line, they will know we are Christians by our love. Well, this is the faithfulness of Ruth to Naomi that Boaz has noticed here. And he said, may the Lord reward you for your deeds, and may you have a full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. And then Ruth said to him, may I continue to find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, even though I am not one of your servants. Well, the description here is of a great comfort that is offered Ruth, despite the fact that she is having to labor very intensely to provide for her family. At least Boaz is offering her comfort, water, and protection. And then at mealtime, Boaz said to her, come here and eat some of this bread and dip your morsel in the sour wine. Sounds like communion again, doesn't it? So she sat beside the reapers, and he heaped up for her some parched grain. She ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. When she got up to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, let her glean even among the standing sheaves, and do not reproach her. Oh, she gets as much as she wants, according to Boaz. You must also pull out some handfuls for her from the bundles, and leave them for her to glean, and do not rebuke her. So Boaz is instructing his workers to make sure there's an extra pile on the ground for Ruth to pick up for herself and for Naomi. It is in this story all about the leftovers, because leftovers are what God continues to provide for people. So this whole idea of gleaning and our understanding of what's left over, Boaz has instructed his people to disown some of what they think belongs to him in order to provide it for Ruth so that she has more leftovers. So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out, that is, separated the grain from the chaff, what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley, which is a fairly large amount. She picked it up and came into town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gleaned. Then she took out and gave her what was left over after she herself had been satisfied. Her mother-in-law said to her, where did you glean today? And where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you. So Ruth must be a super gleaner. She has figured out how to load up her apron and bring it all home. So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked and said, the name of the man with whom I work today is Boaz. Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, blessed be he by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead. Naomi also said to her, this man is a relative of ours, one of our nearest kin. So that word for the nearest kin in the Hebrew is actually the one who has the right to redeem, even the responsibility to redeem in terms of marriage and relationship. So even though Naomi did not have any sons, the whole idea of levirate marriage continues to extend through the family. And apparently Boaz is next in line, but Ruth had no idea about that, and Boaz may not know that himself. But so he is the one who can redeem her, that is, the one who can provide for her so that she does have a family. So he is the redeemer that is offered in the scheme of things for the family of folks. Then Ruth the Moabite said, he even said to me, stay close by my servants until they have finished all my harvest. That is, come back tomorrow and the next day until we're finished. And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is better, my daughter, that you go out with his young women. Otherwise, you might be bothered in another field. So she stayed close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvest. And she lived with her mother-in-law. Oh, we got some more cleaving going on here. She's staying close to the women of Boaz. So this connection of being held close together continues in the story. So now I want to tell you a little bit about another Ruth story. A lot of you probably know as much or more about this story than I do. But the other day when I was walking in the halls of the church, I just happened to notice something I'd seen before and forgotten. This is an old article from the fall of 2015 about love and service in the Presbyterian Horizons magazine. And if I believe I'm looking correctly, it looks like Sissy Kite and Peggy Bible in the picture there. So the folks at Horizons have written a little bit about our Roost Blessings story. And I'm going to stop sharing and ask Dot if she will tell us a little bit about the history of Roost Blessings.
Okay, we'll go back to 2013. for some time, we've been told that there was a great need for cleaning supplies and hygiene items and for people in our community. We get this message from the food bank and different ones in the community. So in January of 2013, a group of Presbyterian women met with Ms. Ricker from the food bank. And she expressed to us the needs that the people did have. And so after meeting with her, we formed a committee, and we met several times and organized what we were going to do for this mission, that we were going to provide the hygiene items and cleaning supplies and so forth. And we would do this mission through fundraising or however we could get it done. We were going to start this mission. So we just finished getting this organized and announced it. And here comes a bequest to the church, and it's given to Presbyterian women. This bequest came from a member of our church. Her name was Ruth Ellis. So we had a Ruth, and it was $2,491.47. So when we received that amount from that bequest, it was truly a blessing. So we had not given a name to our mission, and we started thinking about it, and we said, this has got to will be the seed money for this mission. And so therefore we gave it the name Roost Blessings. But I want to tell you something about our Ruth. When she came to our church, she had just moved here, and she moved to Greeneville because she had a brother that lived down at Mossine. And in the meantime, he had passed away, but she was living at Plaza Towers. So different people in the church would pick her up and bring her to church, or she had a need, they would go up there. But then she became sick. She had Parkinson's disease, and she had to leave Plaza Towers and go to the nursing home. And we continued to take care of Ruth. So here's the little story about Ruth. She grew up in West Virginia during an especially difficult time in the life of our nation and her family. She and her brother were taken to a Presbyterian orphanage. When she finished high school, she moved to Richmond and lived with a Presbyterian family so that she could go to school for her education in nursing. Ruth would often say to me, and this was Dan Donaldson that wrote an article, how important the Presbyterian Church was in providing for her as a child and for her education and career. She was forever grateful for a church family that was willing to embrace her and provide for her, not just for her young life, but throughout her life. So in naming this Roost Blessings, we have honored Ruth Ellis, and we continue to do this after 8 years. And it's been a very successful mission for us. Any questions?
Thanks be to God. Anybody have any questions for Dot about Roost Blessings?
I think the article came about that's in the Horizon. We applied for this. We were told the first year that we were into Roost Blessings, we were in a meeting, and we were told, why don't you apply for a thank offering? Because for this mission. So we thought about it, and we thought we've got to get a year's history and really know what we're doing before we apply for this. So we did apply, and we had a budget set up of $11,000 something a year. So we asked for 3 years budget from the thank offering, and put in for the grant, and we were successful in getting that grant of $34,200. And we're still, we get gifts, we do fundraising and so forth, but we still have a part of that grant that we're using for Roost Blessings.
And I remember in talking with Kathy Reeves, who was on the church staff in Louisville when they were having the Presbyterian women local trip. I forgot what it was called. And part of it was there in Jonesboro, I think.
I think that's what we met, Kathy.
Yep. And she told me later that one of the reasons that we got that grant was because it was an idea that any little church could do. It didn't have to be a deal where they bought real estate, where they invested heavily in something. It was something any church could do. And that was one of the reasons they said, this is the one for us. Well done, you.
It's well done. It's much appreciated.
Interesting how it correlates with Ruth, the story.
Yeah, we did not have a name. We, thought, and then when it was
Yeah.
Ruth, it just, that sealed it right there. It's Roost's Blessings. Just so we had a Ruth,
Yeah.
our missed.
Any other questions or comments? It is so interesting. I look forward to hearing the rest of the story or the rest of the play. If following our agenda,
Loretta,
yes,
I would like to ask Todd something.
sure.
Todd, did Boaz befriend Ruth? He had no idea who she was when he was so kind to her when she was gleaning the fields.
Well, he asked about her and they already knew about her. So his reapers knew who she was. So he knew a little bit about who she was.
Okay.
It's not really clear whether he knew that he was the next in line in terms of redemption.
Right.
But at
But
least
he
he
was
knew who she was and that she came from Elimelech's family, which was his family.
Okay.
Well, I think it's a wonderful story, and like I say, we look forward to hearing the rest and what an example it is for women today. We have to get out and do whatever we need to do to make ends meet and take care of our families. All right, Dot, you want to do our Presbyterian Women Report and Roost Blessings?
Okay. The treasurer's report for the month, I don't have October's here, but anyway, we, on the treasurer's report this month, the only thing that was really significant on there, I did transfer some monies from savings into checking where we had set aside that we're using for the parlor project that we're working on. And so we still have a good, healthy checking and savings account there. The Presbyterian Women's team met on Monday evening, and I'll just go over a few of the things that we did and decisions that we made. On the birthday thank offering, we're still taking orders for the things that we're baking and so forth. And right now we have received in donations and gifts for baking $565. So we hope that'll continue to grow, and at the end of the year, the amount will be split to go to birthday and thank offering. On the Christmas family, we've got 3 families this year that we're doing Christmas for. Jama and some other ladies met and ordered what they could from Walmart for those families. And Deanna and I think Madeline are going to be making or be wrapping and so forth. And then the Easleys will buy the toys for these children. We still have a balance of $353 that's come in, and whatever comes between now and December the 6th, when they will be delivering the Christmas, we'll divide that with the 3 families and buy a grocery card for each one of them. So that's a good thing. Let's see what else went on.
You might want to mention about the parlor.
Yes, we're redecorating the parlor. We're waiting now to get the carpet up. We've been given a nice rug to put on that floor when it comes up, but we've bought the paint and we've got a painter lined up. As quick as we get the carpet up and the draperies and so forth down, he'll put us on his list and get there and paint. And so besides the money that Presbyterian Women had put aside, we got a $5,000 gift from East Tennessee Foundation, which is the Roberts family, Olivia Roberts and Olivia Lodge, and Richard, her brother, and there's 2 other siblings. They gave us a gift of $5,000 that we can use if we need more money in the parlor, and hold this money. And anytime Presbyterian Women has a project within the church that we need this money, we've got it to use. So that's a wonderful gift.
Yeah.
Leanne has talked with John Knight, and he and Marcia are going to go through the church and look at all the blinds and all the windows. If there's any slats that are missing or broken, he will replace those. And then there's one window down in the preschool or down in Nellie's area that does not have a blind at all. And we're going to order a blind for that. So that's what we're working on there. The woodcutters, we will be feeding the woodcutters. And since now we can have meals within the church, that means that we can feed them on site. On January the 8th will be the first Saturday, and Team 2 will feed on January the 8th. February the 5th, Team 4, March the 5th, Team 1, and April the 2nd, Team 3. So we'll provide 4 meals for them this year. I guess that's okay. Then on Roost Blessings, we continue to give the 50 different items up to 50 to the city and county schools each month. And in October, Jama and Mike did deliver to Plaza Towers. Now they can just drop off the cases of supplies in some bags. They actually some of the volunteers within Plaza Towers puts it together and distributes it. So we're still being able to service Plaza Towers too. So anything else you can think of, Loretta, that we covered in that meeting?
No, I think that's it. Then caring for others, I got a note from Sissy. My beginning balance was $585. She has spent $200 assisting 5 families for their water and electricity, leaving a balance of $385. So Barbie,
Yes, ma'am.
you tell us about our other offerings.
Dot called me and she has gotten in $1 for Christmas, $11 for lease coin, and $11 to the sunshine. So that's what we got for the month of November.
Okay. Thank you. I think we all forget, since we're not there physically, to send our money in for these things. So it's hard. I'll give a report on our shut-ins, our elder lights. I tell you, you all are doing a marvelous job. I'm just so impressed with what it means individually. I got a note from Dean, David and Linda Allen. She sent them cards. She talks to Robbie, their son, and they both had COVID and were quarantined in Linda's room, but they have said they had no symptoms, but they were being in isolation was the hardest part. So David is back in his room now, and they're trying to make plans to maybe come to the Christmas Eve service. Margaret Hubbard, I think you read where Dean has gone to see her and sends her pictures of jokes and different things that she says she enjoys. But she did fall and crack 3 ribs. And so I know she's in pain with that. So maybe we can reach out and send Margaret a card. With Hannah, said they've been texting. I didn't realize this. She's taking classes at Tusculum. But not until after January, when she recovers from her surgery. And here's what Hannah had said: 15 days, December 3rd, until my bilateral mastectomy with delayed reconstruction. Nerves are starting to get to me, especially since things aren't completely going as planned, but things are moving forward. Surge will be in East Tennessee. I've been having weekly infusions of some medication, starts with a K. And I will keep having them until surgery to continue to control the HER2 aspect of my cancer. I haven't updated everyone in a while because, to be honest, I've been a bit overwhelmed thinking about everything coming up. I still have a long way to go in treatment, and more surgeries to come, but I know each day I am one step closer. Thought that was pretty, she's having a hard time. Judy Poinsett is still struggling with David's death and her dementia. She is participating in Women's Point activities, and not sitting her in a room. And some days she feels really normal and she loves a good joke, but she misses First Presbyterian Church. Jan reported that she took some mums and pumpkin roll slices to Dora and to the Foxes, and how Dora's doing really well. I think she's loving being there and thankful for every day. I went to see all 5 ladies there at Morning Point, and they continue to enjoy just stopping by and saying hello. Mary Borden niece will be 100 the 29th, I think, of December, and I hope that maybe we can do something for her. I also went to see the Maxwells and visit with him. He's quite a wood, he's a wood carver and makes things out of wood. He's very talented. Her legs are really giving her a lot of problem. They hope to have surgery in Winston-Salem probably in the near future. Let's see, I visited Judy. She's doing good. But she doesn't get out because she can't get the COVID vaccinations. Let's see, Pat Donaldson has taken bread and all to the Foxes, and Joyce has visited with the Wells, and they really enjoy getting cards and phone calls. But I want to thank you all for your continued work with everybody, and I know it means so much to them. Anybody else? Yes.
Loretta, I spoke with Carol Wells last week. Bobby has been going to the wound center because he's got a place on his foot that's not healing. And I think this week he has a little tests at the short stay. So we need to really keep Bobby and Carol in our prayers.
Oh, no, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, Kathleen.
I visited Mary Merrill and we had lunch, and I made her an apple tart. We just had a great visit. We spent the whole afternoon together.
That's wonderful. Oh, great. Anybody else have any report on anybody? Well, I want to thank you all. I know it means so much to all of these shut-ins and our elder lights, for all that you do. Our food bank need for this month are crackers. We've talked about the families, Christmas families, and the sharing tree. Don't forget to take your gloves and hats. I don't think it's a tree this year. It's a box. And so, but don't forget to take your gloves and hats down for the people so they can be distributed pretty soon. Don't forget our picnic Sunday. Please, it's going to be a wonderful event. Nellie, do you have anything to say about? Except it's going to be a great fun time.
It is. I think we're getting excited. I think we're all organized. We're ready to go. Just hope everybody will come. It's supposed to be a fairly warm afternoon Sunday.
I hope that we'll have a great attendance.
I think the weather's going to cooperate with us.
I think so too. That'll be great.
Mm-hmm. It's been a long time since we've all been together.
Yeah,
I know. One thing I did want to bring up is next month, our circle meeting in January. I assume that maybe we'll be back at the church. Is that okay? Anybody? Can we also Zoom from the Simon Room, Todd? If
not from the Simon Room, but we could meet in the library. Do it.
Okay.
I don't know if we could do it in the Simon Room. I'll check with Greg. I know we can do it from the library.
Okay.
But we might be able to set it up for us in the Simon Room also.
Okay, because we want to have refreshments. So we'll look forward to that. And so that way Lucretia can join us again. Yeah. And those that you really can't get out. Who knows what the weather might be too.
You have to furnish your own refreshments, Lucretia. I'm sorry.
We'll let you see what we have.
I think I can do that.
I know. Any other comments or things that we need to talk about? Oh yeah, Wednesday night suppers will begin in January the 12th. So we'll look forward to joining up, getting back to our new normal, whatever that is. Anybody have anything else that we need to talk about or no? Well, thank you all for being here. And we'll look at our closing prayer on page 42.
Before we leave that, I noticed the prayer things. Has anybody heard from Jama today? Mike had his surgery yesterday, and I think Todd was up there. I talked to her yesterday afternoon, and she was going back in at 5 to visit. So if you heard anything today, Todd?
Yeah, I got this from her this morning at 11. She said he had his central line taken out, another IV taken out, the catheter taken out, and the drain tubes taken out.
Wow.
So, and she said he will move, he's in ICU, but he'll move to a step down unit as soon as they have space available. So he's doing well.
Where is he? In Kingsport?
Kingsport.
That's what I thought. Okay. And I will mention my sister-in-law, Betty, she fell last week and they did hip surgery Sunday, but her heart really went out of whack on Monday and it got pretty serious. They moved her to intensive care. She has, her heart is stable now. And so probably be looking for maybe rehab, maybe this weekend. We don't know yet. But keep Betty in your prayers. She's the wife of my brother that passed away in August. So it's a sad situation. Anybody else have anything? Okay.
It's Cynthia, Loretta.
Yeah.
I stepped away, unfortunately, and I don't know if anybody noticed, but I wanted to say in your honor, I'm Ruth to your Naomi, and I just want to say that I have the best mother-in-law in the world, and I want to tell you guys she's great, and lift her up in your prayers because she has had a hard time with her brother and her aunt, and we're doing the best we can to help. But boy, she's there all the time for them. It's a difficult time, and in spite of that, you'd never know because she accepts it with such grace. So I just wanted to thank her and let her know how much she's appreciated.
Wow, that's pretty special. Thank you. Oh, that means a lot. I have said in the past, sometimes I love my daughter-in-laws better than my daughters, and my sons-in-law better than my sons. Back at you, Cynthia. Okay, and on page 42, anybody, anything else? Okay, let's read this together. God of harvest, in the famine places of my life, let me remember Ruth and
Naomi.
Kindness and compassion. Stepping out rather than in a place of hopelessness. Open to the possibilities that I can't see. When my name feels more like bitter than pleasant. Open my eyes to those around me who support me in the smallest ways, as well as those who commit themselves to me fully. Help me to see where I might bring hope into someone else's famine and bitterness, so that together we might see a harvest where we thought there was only barrenness. Amen. Okay, and our benediction. Oh, our prayer requests. continue with Dora, Mike, and Jama, Martha Beamer. Todd, do you have an update maybe on her family? And he's had a lot of,
I'm sorry, I do not. I have not talked to her in the last few weeks.
okay. I know she's had brothers, and it's been a difficult time. And Corky, I guess, they're doing okay as best they can. Jack James, there was somebody, is there something we need to know about him?
Well, he's still struggling, and she has a really hard time moving him around.
Oh, yeah.
And she has to get help when he has to go for a doctor's appointment because she can't get him in and out of the vehicle.
Oh, my.
He does have him at home.
Yeah. So,
As a caregiver.
and then we've talked about Hannah and Judy and Betty. So, okay, for our benediction, go in
In
peace.
peace,
God the
God the
Father,
Father,
Son,
Son, and Holy Spirit.
preserve and keep you this day.
And forevermore.
Amen. So I guess everybody have a happy and blessed holiday season, and we will see each other.
Right. See everybody at the picnic.
That's right. Sunday after church. Thank you.
Bye.
Enjoy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.